Hello, I'm Alan Repke of the Informed TV channel. This August 22nd, after the markets closed, I'm going to present an alternative to Trump's $12 billion policy to compensate U.S. farmers for the effect on tariffs, especially the Chinese tariffs. But so you, viewed as key economist, I'm presenting you some information to get you to think outside the box, as well as to present these numbers to your farm record-keeping systems that you have available to you. And to do that, you're going to have to think outside the box, but use the only farm policy that has stood the test of time without subsidies. Think about sugar policy. Sugar policy is a policy that the industry put together some 30 years ago. I did not put the policy together, but I had influence and understood it well. And I was the one, with the help of Chuck Canton and in the presence of Congressman Rick Nolan, we sold sugar policy to Tip O'Neill, one of the most powerful speakers of the House we've ever had. And he understood, after talking to Chuck Canton and I, that this policy would work long term, and we were right. And now, if I can bring some information, a thought process into you economists and farmers out there that will eventually get a chance to look at this as well, of the simple approach of and the power of loan rates. And under this policy, to save the taxpayer $12 billion and let them get paid from the marketplace, just like sugar has done for over 30 years, I look at, and I encourage you economists and farmers to look at the 2018 national average loan rates. And for all the crops that are under USDA farm policy. And under that, you do a simple thing, either attachment to the 2018 Farm Bill that's sitting in conference committee that is supposed to be passed in September, or an executive order from the president, just like he did, to spend $12 billion of taxpayer money. But what I'm proposing is simply raising the loan rates on all these posted loan rates from USDA by 50%. And the only exception would be corn and soybeans. In the case of corn and soybeans, you double the rate. You take the rate of the corn loan from $1.95 to $3.90 a bushel. You take the price of soybeans from $5 a bushel as loan collateral to $10 a bushel. And what this does is address some of the numbers that the USDA Outlook Conference presented as far as a 10-year projection. And you see that the Chinese and the Europeans that are in desperate need of soybeans or soybean meal pay a fair price relating to cost of production to our farmers today. And to get away from this nonsense of sending checks to farmers based on base acres, or as of this 22nd of August, we don't even know what USDA or Congress is presenting to this program. But what I want to do is save $12 billion. Why? Because a recent Congressional Research Service report shows the only commodity for over 30 years that didn't have any expense to the taxpayer was sugar. And for you naysayers out there, you economists, this weekend I want you to go with your wife or significant other to the grocery store and buy a family-sized box of cornflakes, a family-sized box of Rice Krispies, and a family-sized box of Cheerios or Honey Nut Cheerios. And you'll see that most of that, at least here in Minnesota, that pound-and-a-half box roughly of cereal will sell for about $3.64 for that box of cereal. And yet at the same time, I want you to go to the sugar aisle and buy 4 pounds of sugar that a 4-pound bag of sugar, compare that to what a 1.5-pound box of cereal that has been subsidized for the last 30 years compared to sugar that hasn't, that goes through a much more vigorous process to get in that bag in white crystallized form. And you'll see in Minnesota, at least right now, for a generic bag of sugar, you can buy it for about $4. Or $2, excuse me, $2, and compared to $3.65 for that family size box of the popular 3 cereals. So do that before you block this out of your mind, as that's not a doable thing. The second thing, I want you to start plugging in the numbers for this fall's harvest, rather than selling beans at the current rate here in southern Minnesota now, that's less than $8 a bushel. And the price of corn that is just above $3 a bushel. Yet at the same time, when we look at the cost of the products that come out of there, and when you say the price of corn, we can easily justify $4 a bushel for corn. And how you do that? You simply raise instead of a 10% blend of ethanol, you simply go to a 12% blend. Start with 11, go to 12. And a 12% blend will easily get the supply of corn down into very favorable numbers, even though for myself, based on a lifetime in agriculture last century, you look at the numbers, there's nothing bloated about corn numbers, there's nothing bloated about bean numbers, whether it's on a world basis or U.S. basis. The other thing I want our Secretary of Agriculture to do for President Trump is to call a special meeting in Washington of the 3 leading exporters and producers of soybean in the world: the USA, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. And why I say that? These 4 countries that we're included in produce over 90% of the world's soybeans. We also export over 90% of the export. And I think from a crush standpoint, a soybean meal is something like 75% of the soybean meal. So when we talk about OPEC just meeting recently, that for at least temporarily kicked the price of crude oil over $70 a barrel, just look what sound governance and sound economics, if we could just get Sonny Perdue to get away from his people-to-people tours of farm country and the world, and just look at some sound economics and talk with our soybean producers or exports of ag products in general in South America, and start using the sound economic policies that we have. And these 4 countries, good old USA, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, are all drowning in debt. So at the very least, we should get together to see that we get a fair price so we can address the debt of our 4 nations, if you economists don't want to look at it from a standpoint of helping rural America and farm income. But when we look at back to raising the loan rate by 50% on all the commodities, or looking at, as well as doubling the rate for corn and soybeans, which relates to cost of production and the 10-year trend that USDA put together. This is a very simple solution compared to spending $12 billion. And I think you'll find out, if I can just get you folks at FarmDoc who know me, as well as you people at FinPac, or the chief economist at the USDA, or the past one of the past chief economists, Joe Glover, and who knows me, as well as Bruce Babcock, the retiree at Iowa State, and of course Dr. Darrell Ray, as well as Harwood Schaefer at APAC, the University of Tennessee, that about 2000 wrote an article about a farm policy for the 2000 Farm Bill debate that said was fascinating, and I encourage you to look at that article. I'll try to see if I can find it and put that in with this email that I'm sending you economists. But the reality is, people, we need to go back to what the function of farm policy is. Just like the function of patents, copyrights, trademarks, exclusive distribution, what are they? They're all price supports for efficient producers of products and services, so they get paid. And it's time we do the same for farm policy and get away from these ridiculous subsidy payments. Just looked at a piece that showed on the 14, 15, and 16 crop, we actually spent more money in those three crops now than we did in the previous farm bill, when we said Congress told us they were going to get away from all these direct payments. And the only way we get away from direct payments, you economists, is the fact that you have to put sound numbers into your guideline, what I'm talking here. You simply set the loan rate at a high enough level, and at the same time you make that loan a 9-month loan, but with the option for the producer to go another 9 months. And one of the reasons I'm looking at that, many, including the folks at APEC, have always been talking about what is our reserve. We have to wake up to the fact that we haven't had a major drought in this country since 1988. So we're long overdue, and so that we have some product in the bin, or at least the farmers have some product in the bin rather than the end user, to see that if they have a reduced crop, they got something to sell, rather than the taxpayer paying these ridiculous subsidies for federal crop insurance. And so we have food to take care of not only the American people, but our fellow man around the world. But at the present policy, without a reserve, and in this case, when you go to a $10 soybean loan level and a $4 loan level, the farmer himself funds his reserve. He can sell the carry in the market just like the grain merchants have done for years, and he can start managing or building up his own reserve rather than dumping product on the market at the end of the year and say, well, now we've cleared the marketplace. We've never cleared the marketplace to give the product to the end user. All they do is sit with a big smile on their face, and the American taxpayer continues to write subsidies checks, which makes no sense. So from a standpoint of you economists out there, and especially the good folks at FarmDoc that write a daily column, start entering $4 bushel loan level and $10 bushel beans into your Illinois farm record keeping system, and see what the farmers say about that. And I would even be open to that becoming a recourse loan. And if the farmer out there thinks this is too high priced, if he produces 100,000 bushel of soybeans this year, if he only wants to take that $10 loan on half of them, if he thinks a $5 loan is adequate, he can surely do that. So I'm not forcing anybody's hands. I'm just asking you economists to look at the only farm policy that has stood the test of time, sugar, based on one simple understanding of economics. You put a loan level there so the marketplace or currency manipulation cannot steal the product from efficient producers. And at the same time, with this tariffs that President Trump has put on, we look at the 5-year average of imports, and for this 1-year attachment to get you economists to think outside the box, as well as you farmers out there, and to show the American taxpayer we do not need to be spending all this money on subsidies for our highly efficient farmers. That we, for this 1 year, reduce any imports of product coming in this country by 20%. I mean, the world is basically blessed what China has done. And the other thing now, when you look at today's close in the marketplace, these end users, including China and Europe, have had plenty of opportunity to lock in bean prices. So if the price goes up, it's not going to cost them anything. Why aren't they using those hedges? It looks to me as the final trade on November beans this August 22nd was 870. When I look at the price of ethanol, it was our corn. Let's look at corn here. December corn was trading at $3.67 a bushel. With today's costs, that's ridiculous. And when I look at Central Region Co-op in central Minnesota, they show their bids for old crop corn today at $3.02 a bushel. New crop corn at $3.09. They show soybeans at $7.72 a bushel, and new crop at the same, I guess. So we're letting the Chinese walk on us. We're letting the European walk on us, instead of telling that the price of grain today, even with a 50% increase in loans on all the covered commodities, and doubling the loan rate for corn and soybeans for just this 1 year, to show people the power of a sound loan program. And then when you say, well, we got some of these commentarians, we got too much corn and we got too much beans, that's a bunch of bull. You know, I started farming back in the day when we were raising 6 billion bushel of corn, and the economists said, well, if we could ever get the inventory of corn down to 2 billion bushel, you'd get a price for your product. So here, when I look at ethanol futures today, closing the September future as well as the October future, $1.33 a gallon. And then when I look at robo gasoline, and remember, ethanol is 113 octane, and robo gasoline is either 84 or 85 octane, and the price of that closed today at 207. I got to see with my questionable light here, and $1.96 in October. I believe it is, but I think you economists get my drift, that somebody has to step forward. We had Farm Fest here in Minnesota. I didn't go there, but there was nothing on the docket. I've talked to the people or sent them an email at Big Iron in Fargo. They got their big farm show coming up in early September. I want to be on the podium. I want to talk about a viable alternative. I went to college at the University of Minnesota at Crookston in Red River Valley. I was on the American Sugar Beet Growers Board for 2 years, at a time that we showed the rest of the industry how to use your efficient production to get a fair price for your product, and to use PAC money to see that when the industry was in a meeting of both cane and sugar people, and there was still a lot of corporations involved, and said, well, who can get in to talk to Speaker O'Neill? We've been out here for 2 weeks and we haven't accomplished a thing. Can somebody get in and talk to the Speaker? And I'm in the back of the room waving my hand, and finally the Speaker starts laughing. There's somebody in the back thinks they got an answer for this. They all turn and laugh, and that's in the days when we smoked cigars in that room just for theory, if nothing else. And I said, well, I can get in. And well, they said, how can you do that when all us powerful corporations and big co-ops can't get in? Well, see, I can write a big enough check to slide under his door, not to buy him, but to get enough time to show him what sound policy can do for the country, as well as taxpayers, consumers, in the world. And The next morning I called my Democratic congressman at the time, his first go around, Rick Nolan, and said, Rick, I want to be in the Speaker's office tomorrow morning or the next morning, whatever it was, and I want to talk sugar. And I told the entourage when we got there that he said, well, you're going to get 5 minutes with the Speaker. And I said, no. I said, I arranged this. I told you guys what I would do for the Speaker so he could have money for his party and his candidates to present their position, and all I want is enough time to present the position of sugar to this world leader, a very powerful and successful world leader. And we spent just about an hour with Tip O'Neill when we were supposed to get 5 or 10 minutes. But I told him, you give me the time to get into the Speaker's mind and show him sound mind, I'll double my payments. And we weren't there to buy and never were under my sugar pack, and all the rest of the industry fell in line of what Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar Co-op was doing. And there was other packs at the time, but none of those guys had the authority or understanding of, I could care less about what party we were working with. My community, my industry, my family's operation, we had to have a price for our sugar, or the huge investment we had made in Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar Co-op at Renville was going to become the biggest pigeon sanctuary in the United States. And so when people of extreme substance put policies together that work, I'm just asking you economists and you farmers out there to sketch in these simple numbers and to lead the world, to show the world that when we have Apple computer that now has a $1 trillion market cap, but at the same time they got $250 billion, almost 250 billion in cash on hand. And you ag economists say we can't raise the loan level to see that our farmers have some negotiating power. We can't raise the price, raise the percentage of ethanol in our gasoline to 12%, so we don't have a 70-cent a gallon difference. Yet you go to the pump, and what do? You pay on octane. Think of this, my fellow economists, my fellow farm families out there, that as well as the taxpayer. We're sitting in a point in time here when the big muckety-mucks charge whatever they want, and we have media empires out there that justify that. It's that the old saying go, the more they make, the better it is for us, and the less we make, the better it is for us. We have a workforce today in this country that has to compete with China and Mexico and Vietnam, but when it comes to the big tech companies and so on down the line, the Fortune 500, the guys at the top, they just have to get raise after raise after raise. The same for medical, any professional service. But the common guy, you got to compete. You've got to let your wages roll back. And academia has come to the forward to the point where we have a title system. We're titled. You have to be titled. You have to be rich. You have to be have a doctorate or master's degree or a certification to make a decent living. The rest of America can just go on and say, we'll just do without, or we'll do with less. And that's ridiculous in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So I'm putting this challenge to you, especially some of you economists out there that I really respect, and you know who I'm talking about because you've had some contact with me. And I'm just asking an organization, a Minnesota organization, in fact the chief economist now, I believe, is a University of Minnesota graduate. Mr. Chief Economist, pump in these numbers. Put these numbers in, and you'll see that we can raise farm income and not spend $12 billion. And the farmer will be happier out there, and the marketplace starts to work. And this loan program, the farmer doesn't have to take it. If he says that Ripke doesn't know what he's talking about, I'm just going to sell $3 corn and I'm going to lose a little money, and I'm going to let the oil companies sell 84 octane gas for $2 a gallon on the New York Exchange or Chicago Exchange, wherever it's at, and I'm going to be really content this election cycle with my ethanol that's 113 octane and only sells for a little over $1.30 a gallon. Myself, if I was still farming, if I was still involved in agriculture, I would not be sitting there and voting some of these people back into office that have what? Give a select group of families one heck of a lot of government money. But when we look out in the old small towns that I grew up in, they're basically boarding up the streets, and that's really sad. And so if I can just get you economists to what? Simply look outside the box, simply write that a daily farm doc article of, hey farmers, what if suddenly you could take a commodity loan this fall after harvest on those soybeans for $10 a bushel or $4 a bushel for that corn or that rice or those peanuts or that cotton, and for 1 year an attachment, and to see how things work, and then have the ability to roll that for another 18 months and come up with your own reserve that you can use the board to get you some storage or some carry in that, or just be ready for that drought that will be coming. Just ask those farmers in Illinois in 2008, wasn't it? When, not 2008, 12 I guess it was, when they had a severe drought. Would they wish they had some beans and corn in their bin? You bet they would have. And so going forward, that's all I'm asking of you economists today. Think outside the box. Look at the only policy that has stood the test of time, and that is the sugar policy, with no cost to the consumers other than in 2013 they did some mismanagement and forfeited some sugar. But the reality is a sound loan policy works. And when Chuck Canton and I sold it to Tip O'Neill, and he took it as gospel, and what has happened after 30 some years? It is gospel. You can run farm policy and let the consumer pay a fair price for their product. We're too fat in the first place. And so here's my challenge to you economists this week. Look at this over the weekend, write about it next week. And thanks for listening to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota.